Zimbabwean authorities are making a new appeal for aid as the impact of the El Niño-induced drought worsens. In April, Zimbabwe joined Zambia and Malawi in declaring a state of disaster over a devastating drought sweeping across much of southern Africa. According to the government's crop assessment report, the maize harvest decreased by more than 72% compared to the previous season. For more on this, I'm joined by Richard Mahomva, Zimbabwe Director of International Communications. Richard, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Just how prepared was the government of Zimbabwe to deal with this devastation of El Nino?
As you know, with disasters come unannounced. So I think the state of preparedness can be judged in terms of the already prevailing successes in terms of our agricultural sector. You'd recall that as early as 2020 and 2021, courtesy of the precision of Mahomva, we were able to have a very good harvest. And also there's been the issue of investments in irrigation. So we are saying there are other policy dividends that have always been in place, courtesy of the policy architecture that has been put by the government. But now, given that we have got new circumstances that have arisen, it means that there has to be continued policy interventions that address this particular problem.
So what are the policy interventions that you're making to deal with El Nino?
As a starting point, you would notice that in terms of our wheat production, for starters, we had an upshoot from an approximate of from the traditional 40 to 60,000 metric tons, and now we have got about 400,000 to 500,000 metric tons that we have actually been harvesting. And also in terms of the irrigation model with the agro-tailoring model that the government has also put in place, we are going to see a situation whereby there would be a dedicated food production to avert the current crisis. And also there's been a new model to exclusively finance farmers, considering that lately farmers were not paid in Forex, and there's that particular arrangement that is being put in place. So these are unique interventions that take care of the crisis. And this is not the first time, remember, Zimbabwe has been...
Sorry, Richard, you seem to be speaking to interventions that are dealing with wheat. The challenge is with maize, which is a staple of Zimbabwe, and the fact that the government has now appealed to external parties, such as the World Food Programme, to assist. So how is the Zimbabwean government dealing with this challenge? Obviously, the one thing is that there's been a declaration of a national disaster and an appeal for support.
Yeah, so the starting point, Hugo, goes back to the issues of funding. To say, in as much as the government is making these appeals for aid, the government has also made a dedicated effort to maximize its resources around issues of food security. That is point number one. But the example around the wheat production emphasizes that there are other pockets of our agricultural excellence that are actually doing well, and these are sources of foreign currency remittances. And the moment we have got those stable foreign currency balances, it actually means that we are able to avert some of these effects of the El Nino drought.
So let's look at reaction that you've gotten from the World Food Programs and other quarters that you've appealed to. One of the challenges that Zimbabwe or any of the SADC nations is likely to face is that the El Nino drought is not just impacting Zimbabwe alone, it's a number of countries. So whatever support is going to be given has got to be split multiple ways.
Well, I would like to draw you back even to the issue of the COVID-19 pandemic, where Zimbabwe found itself in very extraordinary circumstances compared to our neighbors. Zimbabwe did not get the multilateral funding that other countries in the continent were getting. So against that backdrop, you'd also notice that under these very unique circumstances, Zimbabwe has to actually design funding models that also go beyond excessive dependence on humanitarian aid. And I think if you look at the revenue that is coming from the mining sector, I made reference to other sectors within the agriculture. So if Zimbabwe makes good use of revenue from all those other areas, then we might find ourselves in a situation whereby we are able to contain these potential looming food crisis.
Richard, how does the government plan to utilize the funds required for humanitarian assistance, and what accountability measures are in place to ensure effective use of these resources?
So the first move of accountability by the government was the president's invocation of the Civil Protection Act to say he subjected his government to that open sense of vulnerability. So point number two, the next step of accountability is to ensuring that given that there's been a survey that has been conducted by government under the ZIMLAC program, it means that the government is already activating systems that indicate the gaps so that those particular gaps are actually filled. So for me, those initiatives are very critical. And also there's been an interministerial committee that has been set to that effect to ensure that vulnerable communities are taken care of. So for me, the setting up of those initiatives show the potential responsiveness to this looming crisis. And the fact that there are responsible structures to that effect is quite elaborate of how government is willing to take care of this potential hunger issue. And there's no government that would want to see its citizens starve, to see its citizens hungry, because a hungry man is an angry man, and a hungry nation certainly becomes an angry nation. So the government is certainly conscious of that reality and would ensure that no one and no place is left behind in terms of food provisions.
Richard, there have been accusations in the past of partisan distribution of resources, particularly in similar situations or with seed maize to those individuals that are affiliated to the ruling party. Does the government give assurance that distribution will be equitable regardless of political or religious or any other affiliation?
First, you are situating that in the past. And if it is something that is in the past, it means that it is something that no longer exists in the present, given the continued policy reforms that are in place. But most importantly, we should not also forget that that narrative has actually been anchored on the traditional demonization narrative that has always wanted to present Zimbabwe as an excessively polarized state. So it is not a reflection of facts on the ground. If you go on the ground, our communities are benefiting from various input initiatives. For example, you've got the presidential input scheme, which is devoid of partisan limitations. So it's not a reality that is in sync with what the ordinary man is experiencing in Zimbabwe beyond propaganda hype.